Well, moving on to mental health, workplace mental health has rightly been an important focus recently. It's also, though, a crucial issue for school-age people, with 75% of mental health problems likely to occur before the age of 25. Well, twins Ian and Julian Fagan have developed a wellbeing check-in app for schools called Skodel that allows students to express how they're feeling on a weekly basis. They're here in the Brain Guru studios to tell us more about it, and a timely time, I guess, to be launching this, given the COVID crisis and how much it must be having an impact on mental health of students in particular. Can you tell us a bit about the app?
Yeah, sure. Well, as you alluded to, it's a wellbeing check-in app, and I think at its core, when you look at the outlets that we have in a school environment where we feel comfortable and engaged to actually communicate how things are going, they're very few, and so at its core, Skodel was really about providing that outlet for students that might be going through a struggle. And particularly during COVID, of course, there's been, I guess, an amplification of a number of existing threats, but the new threats that we don't know exactly how they're going to play out. So changing social interaction, isolation, those sorts of things really start to amplify now. So those outlets are important for students.
So Ian, what led you and your brother Julian to sort of introduce this, to put this together?
Yeah, it was my own personal experiences largely. I actually, as a school-age student, went through a mental illness challenge, and I spent a lot of time out of school because of it. I was fortunate when we talk about outlets. I had Julian as a primary supporter there for me, who I could have an open and honest conversation about how things are going. And so, but there are many, of course, that don't have that outlet, and so it was really about providing those students who might be going through a similar challenge to what I was facing with that, to be able to speak about it open and honestly within the school environment.
The best products come from personal experience too, because you know exactly what's needed. Julian, what have you seen? I mean, have schools been pretty receptive to it so far?
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, there was this period throughout COVID where schools went through a bit of a paralysis because they had a million things on the go. Yeah. How are they going to respond to COVID and remote learning? But now there's this wake-up period where they've sort of seen that, okay, students, we have to make wellbeing a priority now. If it wasn't the number one priority before COVID, it certainly is now. Yeah. And so schools are sharpening their focus on that. And I think there's a silver lining in all of this, in that it has forced them to take it as a priority now for school students.
So take us through this process, because it's about a check-in, and I can sort of see, especially in an era where we've got remote learning, and you can't be a teacher who's keeping an eye out on the kids. How do you engage with it as a child to sort of check in on your own mental health?
So it's a web-based application and it's responsive across all devices. But you raise a good point there about when you shifted to remote learning, there was a challenge there, because traditional approaches rely on teacher observations. And most of the time, 40% of the time you're right with how you think students are feeling, 60% of the time you don't know. And so in order to know how students are feeling, you have to have that conversation. And what it does by checking in with students is it starts the dialogue, because it gives students a safe space. They're more familiar with checking in and doing things digitally now through emojis, illustrations, and an opportunity to just tell it how it is. And they can do that online and start the dialogue there about anything that they might have on their mind. And it's not necessarily focused around vulnerabilities, fears, having bad days. It's actually about positivity as well. So 90% of students open up about things that are really positive: hopes, dreams, aspirations, sharing stories of gratitude to the teachers for doing a great job.
And not only this, but also you can have data on the cohort, right? I mean, it gives you trends of how the students in general are feeling.
Yeah, there's that day-to-day tactical insight in the classroom that's really important, but then you're building up a really useful bank of wellbeing data to inform program planning. So an example of this is a transition period from, say, primary school to high school. We noticed that friendships spike as a massive driver of both positivity and negativity. So then it obviously helps inform that program planning around, okay, during this transition we need a much sharper focus on how do you overcome fears about making new friends, how do you make new friends, and work on that particular skill set, because we know it's fundamental to our wellbeing down the track as well.
So Ian, how do you know you got this right? Who did you work with to make sure that this project was not only working and got the engagement, but was sound in terms of how it then interacted with the students and the help they needed?
Yeah, that's a really important part. So we're working with Andrew Fuller, who's one of the leading psychologists in Australasia. He's worked with over 3,000 school communities across UK, New Zealand and Australia. And I think with him, what makes him so unique and valuable in this space is his ability to get across messaging in a way that resonates with young people and actually engages them in Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about the funding? Because you're currently raising about $1.5 million. You're saying that's going quite well, been oversubscribed in terms of the funding. What do you plan? How's that process been, first up, and then what do you plan to use the funds for?
It's been pretty grueling with the process of raising funding. It's the first time doing it, but we actually started to see some investors come on board who it sits outside their traditional investment portfolio, but why they were coming on board was more so the social good aspect to it, their parents themselves. And so they invested from a passionate standpoint as well. And once we started to see the initial investors come on board, the response from other investors was a lot more positive, and they followed.
Domino effect.
Yeah, of course.
Which is great. What are you using the funds for then? Where are they targeted?
A lot of it will be going towards the wellbeing support solutions that we're building out with Andrew Fuller. So we see that the process of getting students to speak up about what's on their mind is definitely an important part of the process, but there is this response that is needed. So as student check-in data becomes visible and surfaces for teachers, there is a clinical level of expertise that can sometimes be required to respond to this data, and Andrew's building out infographics, punchy videos to support teachers there.
I'm just interested with, there's a huge focus on mental health at the moment because of what's going on with the COVID crisis, and with the government sort of being more and more involved in this, is there an opportunity for grants perhaps for government assistance in this sort of industry in particular?
We hope so. I mean, over in New Zealand, for example, it's been funded by New Zealand Ministry of Education over there, so schools can apply for funding and they get Skodel funded through that way. And we'd hope to see something similar over here because it's certainly needed. Yeah.
So just before we go, guys, you're in 4 countries. You're in the US, the UK, Australia and New Zealand. You've got around about 10,000 check-ins a month, which is amazing. Yeah. Tell us about your next step. What level do you want to get this to? Do you want 1 million people checking in, 1 million school kids a month checking in? What's your next goal?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's our vision is to make wellbeing understood universally and communicated as well. So the more schools that we can onboard, the more students that we can get talking about wellbeing as a starting point is the end goal for us. So a million students talking about this, yeah, definitely.
Well, Julian, Ian, great to have you both in, and thanks for telling us about Skodel. Really appreciate your time and all the best with it.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
It's a really important initiative right now in particular.